In Shani and Beshalach, we find Bnei Yisrael sandwiched between the Yam Suf and looking behind them, the rapidly approaching enemies of the Mitzrayim, Paro and his chariots, as well as many from the Egyptian civilians. And Rav Eli Monk, in his Sefer Kol HaTorah, has a fascinating analysis of the response of the Jewish people and different responses within the Jewish people. And he summarizes it by saying, if you analyze the Psukim, there are really four different responses, four different points of view as to how to respond to the approaching Egyptians. Some, he explains, argued that ultimately the only thing at this point left to do was to cast themselves into the sea, to essentially give themselves up. Group number two were those who suggested that there could be hope in trying to make peace and return to Mitzrayim, to agreeing, allow us to come back, they say to Moshe, to go back and serve Mitzrayim. We need not be here, we rather go back to Mitzrayim to serve them as slaves rather than be in such a situation of danger. Thirdly, there were those who said, let's stay where we are and let's fight, let's embrace the battle. And finally, the fourth crew was those who said that let's at least raise our voices, let's scream, let's try to frighten the Egyptians and try to fend them off in that strategy. All four of those, he explains, were addressed in one fell swoop by Moshe's response. In the psukim that follow Yud Gimel and Yud Daled, Moshe says, Al tiru, don't fear, stand fast and see the salvation of God. Right? Stay here. Hisyatzvu re'u as Yeshuas Hashem. Stay still. Don't go anywhere. Secondly, he responds and he says, you have seen Egypt today, but you will never see them again. Meaning to say that you're not going back to Mitzrayim. To the third group who wanted to wage war, Moshe said, Hashem yilachim lachem. Hashem is going to do battle for you. And finally, for the last group that wanted to yell and scream, Moshe said, please do not do so, but rather you should remain silent. And all four of those were responses to the four groups, the four strategies, which the Bnei Yisrael had intended to perhaps invoke. And Rav Monk points out a fascinating insight that those four approaches reflect the four ways in which the Jewish people have consistently throughout history had an attitude towards our relationship with the other nations. Some say that in response to anti-Semitism, all we can do is join them, that we just cast ourselves into the waves of whatever it may be and assimilate within them. The second is those that are oppressed by other nations, that essentially we're saying we can't do anything. Let's just accept their authority over us. Let's accept as if we're returning to Egypt, to slavery. Thirdly, there are those that advocate violence, to regain their rights and freedom through violence. And finally, those who try to use their voice through petitions, declarations, etc. Those echo the four strategies in which the Jewish people, in their panic, had tried to deal with the approaching Mitzrayim. But then's the kicker. Because if we read, it's already going into the very first pasuk of the next Aliyah, but Moshe turns to Hashem, he says, Hashem yilachem lachem, and then Hashem reminds Moshe, he says, Ma titzaki lai, why are you turning to me? Why are you yelling to me? Tell them, Moshe, the Yisa'u. Tell them to keep going, to keep traveling towards their destination, to continue with faith, with confidence that I will be there with them. And that, says Rabbi Monk, is an approach that we must continue to take. That whatever our strategies may be, that whatever we feel the most in line with, we have to remember v'yisa'u. That whatever we're experiencing, whatever oppression, whatever threats we may feel, ultimately remember what Hashem told Moshe to relate to Bnei Yisrael v'yisa'u, to continue with faith, with confidence that God will always be with us.